Every morning at exactly 7, the little bell above the door of Maple Street Diner rang softly as the same old man walked in. His name was Mr. Harris, though few people in town really knew him. He was tall but thin, with a gentle curve in his back that spoke of age and struggle. His gray hair was always neatly combed, but his clothes were worn and faded from years of use. He walked slowly, leaning slightly on a wooden cane, yet he always wore a faint smile as if to remind the world that he was still thankful for another day. Emma, a kind-hearted waitress in her early 20s, worked the morning shift every day. She had noticed him from the first week she started. While other customers came and went, talking loudly or rushing to work, Mr. Harris always sat quietly in the same corner booth by the window. He'd look outside, watching the sunrise over the small town streets, and sip a cup of coffee like it was the most precious thing in the world. At first, Emma didn't pay much attention, but soon, she realized something unusual about him. He never ordered more than one small sandwich and a cup of coffee. Sometimes, he'd even skip the sandwich, pretending he wasn't hungry. Once, Emma saw him carefully counting coins from his pocket before paying, his hands shaking slightly. That sight touched her deeply. She could tell he wasn't just old, he was struggling. The next morning, when he ordered only coffee, Emma quietly added a slice of pie to his plate. When he tried to protest, she smiled and said, "It's on the house today, sir. You've earned it for being our favorite customer." Mr. Harris's eyes softened. "You're too kind, young lady," he replied in a trembling voice. "I can't accept charity." But Emma simply smiled again. "It's not charity. It's a thank you for brightening our mornings." From that day, a small friendship began to bloom between them. Every morning, Emma made sure his table was clean and his coffee was warm before he arrived. Sometimes she even left a little note beside his plate, saying things like, "Have a wonderful day," or "Don't forget to smile." He'd chuckle quietly, folding the note and keeping it in his coat pocket like a treasure. The other waitresses often teased Emma. "Why do you waste your time on that old man?" one of them said. "He barely tips, and he looks like he can't even afford the coffee." Emma just shook her head and smiled. "Not everyone gives money," she said softly. "Some people give lessons, and I think he has many." As days turned into weeks, Emma and Mr. Harris began to talk more. During her short breaks, she'd sit across from him for a few minutes, listening to his gentle voice. He told her little stories about how he used to travel when he was younger, how he loved classical music, and how he missed the days when people truly talked to each other instead of staring at their phones. Once, Emma asked, "Do you have any family nearby, Mr. Harris?" The old man paused, his eyes lowering to his coffee cup. "Not anymore," he whispered. "I had a family. But time has a way of taking things from you." Emma didn't ask further. She simply nodded, her heart heavy, and refilled his cup. Even though Mr. Harris didn't say much about his past, his presence brought calmness to the diner. The regular customers began to notice too. Some even greeted him kindly when they walked in. There was something peaceful about the way he smiled at everyone, as if he carried no bitterness, no anger. Only quiet gratitude for the life he still had. One cold morning, Emma saw him shivering slightly as he entered. Without saying a word, she brought him a cup of hot cocoa instead of coffee and draped a small blanket she kept at the diner over his shoulders. He looked up at her with watery eyes and said softly, "You remind me of someone I used to know, someone who believed in kindness, no matter what the world said." Emma felt her heart swell. "Maybe that's because kindness never dies, Mr. Harris," she said. "It just moves from one person to another." The old man smiled, but his eyes looked distant, as if her words had awakened a memory long buried. From then on, their bond grew stronger. Emma began to notice the little details, how he always left exactly 3 coins as a tip, no matter what he ordered. It wasn't much, but she realized it was his way of saying thank you. Sometimes, he'd bring her small things, a flower he found by the road, a folded paper crane, or a note with a quote about kindness. Each day, their simple exchange filled the diner with warmth. The other staff, who once mocked Emma for wasting time, now quietly admired her. They began serving Mr. Harris more kindly too, inspired by her gentle heart. For Emma, those mornings became the best part of her day. She didn't see him as a poor old man. She saw him as someone who reminded her what truly mattered in life. She didn't know who he really was or what secrets he carried, but she felt deep down that their meeting wasn't by chance. And while she couldn't have known it yet, her daily act of kindness, a free meal, a warm smile, a seat by the window, would soon come back to her in a way that would change her entire life forever. Because sometimes, the smallest kindness to a stranger becomes the beginning of an extraordinary story. Days slowly turned into weeks, and the quiet bond between Emma and Mr. Harris grew deeper. Every morning, as the soft golden sunlight entered through the diner windows, Emma could already tell what kind of day it would be. If she saw the old man walking slowly toward the door with his cane, she knew it would be a good one. His arrival had become part of her morning routine, just like brewing coffee or taking orders. Mr. Harris would always greet her with the same gentle smile. "Good morning, Miss Emma," he would say, his voice soft but warm. And Emma would reply with her cheerful tone, "Good morning, Mr. Harris. Your usual seat and your usual coffee." He would nod, and they would both laugh a little, sharing that small, familiar moment. Over time, Emma started to notice how Mr. Harris looked forward to their little chats. He seemed to come alive when she sat across from him during her short breaks. His tired eyes would sparkle with life whenever he told a story or shared something from his past. One morning, when the diner was quiet and there were no customers, Emma sat with him as he stirred his coffee slowly. "You always come alone," she said gently. "Don't you have anyone, family or friends around here?" Mr. Harris took a long pause before answering. "I used to," he said softly. "I had a wife. Her name was Margaret. She loved morning sunlight just like you do." He smiled faintly as if remembering something precious. "We used to sit by the window every morning, just watching the world wake up." Emma listened quietly. She could feel the emotion behind his words. "What happened to her?" she asked softly. "She passed away many years ago," he said, looking down at his cup. "After that, the house felt empty. I tried to stay busy, but when you lose the person who made your world feel alive, you realize nothing else really matters." Emma didn't know what to say, so she just reached out and gently placed her hand over his. "I'm sure she's proud that you still greet every day with a smile," she said kindly. Mr. Harris looked at her, his eyes glistening, and nodded slowly. From that day on, their talks became a daily ritual. He told her stories about his younger days, about how he loved fixing old cars, how he once owned a small bookstore, and how he enjoyed helping neighbors without expecting anything in return. Emma realized he was a man full of wisdom, but also full of loneliness. Sometimes he would give her advice too. "Emma," he said one morning, "the world can be cold. People forget to care. But kindness is a seed. Even if you don't see it grow, it will bloom somewhere." Those words stayed with her. Every time she felt tired from work or upset about rude customers, she remembered them and found the strength to smile again. Soon, other customers began noticing their friendship. Some found it heartwarming, while others whispered behind her back. One of the waitresses, Megan, said one afternoon, "You act like he's your grandpa or something. He's just an old man who can barely pay for his meal." Emma looked at her calmly. "Maybe he is just an old man," she said softly, "but he's also someone who deserves kindness like everyone else." She didn't argue further, but in her heart, she felt even more determined to make sure Mr. Harris never felt lonely again. Their bond wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was built on small, genuine moments, a shared laugh, a cup of coffee, a conversation about the past. And even though Emma was young and struggling herself, she never saw her kindness as a burden. To her, it was natural. One afternoon, as she cleared his table, Mr. Harris said something that made her heart skip. "You know, Miss Emma," he said thoughtfully, "people walk past each other every day, pretending not to see. But you noticed. You looked at me, not through me. That's rare in this world." Emma smiled shyly. "I just treat people the way I want to be treated." He nodded and said quietly, "And that's exactly what the world needs more of." As weeks went by, she began to notice changes in him. His back wasn't as bent. His steps were a little steadier, and his eyes were brighter. It was as if their friendship had given him new life. He started bringing her little surprises. Once a small daisy from the park. Another time a folded paper bird he said he learned to make when he was young. One day, he handed her a small handwritten note. When she opened it, it said, "Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She tucked the note into her apron pocket and kept it there for days, as if it were something priceless. She didn't know who Mr. Harris really was or what kind of life he had lived, but she knew one thing for sure. She was glad she met him. His presence reminded her that compassion didn't need a reason, and that friendship could bloom between the most unlikely people. Every morning, as she prepared his usual order, Emma felt peace in her heart. Helping him didn't just make his day better, it made hers better too. She looked forward to his quiet jokes, his gentle laughter, and the way he always thanked her as if she had done something extraordinary, even when it was just a refill of coffee. Neither of them knew it yet, but this simple connection, born from shared coffee and kindness, was leading toward something far greater than either of them could imagine. What Emma thought was just a small act of humanity would one day reveal a truth so powerful that it would completely change her life. For now, though, she was just happy to be part of his mornings. Two souls from different worlds, sharing the same corner booth, proving that kindness could build bridges stronger than money, fame, or time itself. As weeks passed, the bond between Emma and Mr. Harris became something that everyone in the diner noticed. Their friendship had grown from simple morning greetings into something warm and genuine. Emma didn't see Mr. Harris as just another customer anymore. He was part of her day, part of the reason she looked forward to coming to work. But not everyone saw it that way. Some of her co-workers started to whisper behind her back. They didn't understand why she cared so much for an old man who clearly didn't have money. "She's wasting her time," one of the waitresses, Megan, said one morning while wiping down the counter. "That man barely tips. If she wants to help people, she should volunteer at a charity, not here." Emma pretended not to hear, but deep down, it hurt. Still, she didn't let their words change her. She believed in kindness, real kindness, the kind that doesn't expect anything in return. "Maybe he doesn't have much," she told herself quietly, "but he gives me something no one else does, peace." Even the manager, Mr. Cook, sometimes looked at her disapprovingly. "Emma," he said one afternoon, "you spend too much time talking to that man. You have other customers. Be careful not to get too attached. People come and go." She nodded politely, but inside, she disagreed. Mr. Harris wasn't just another customer. There was something about him that felt special, something gentle and mysterious. He always spoke with such wisdom, and even though he looked frail, his words were full of strength. One rainy morning, when thunder rolled outside and most people stayed home, Mr. Harris still came. His coat was soaked, and his shoes left wet footprints on the floor. Emma rushed over immediately. "Mr. Harris, you shouldn't have come out in this weather," she said, handing him a towel. He smiled weakly. "Routine keeps me alive, my dear. Besides, your coffee warms more than just my hands." Emma chuckled softly as she helped him dry off. She made him a fresh cup of coffee, added a slice of pie and said, "This one's on me. No arguments today." He smiled, but this time there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "You're too kind, Emma. People don't do things like this anymore." "Well," she said, sitting down across from him for a moment, "then maybe I'll start a new trend." That made him laugh, a real laugh that brightened the gloomy morning. And for a few minutes they both forgot about the rain, the world, and all its worries. From that day on, Mr. Harris started coming a little earlier, sometimes just to sit quietly and watch Emma work. He said the sound of her voice made the diner feel alive. And when she finally had a moment to sit with him, he'd always share little lessons about life. "Do you know what the greatest treasure in life is?" he asked one morning. Emma thought for a second and said, "Love." He smiled. "Close. It's gratitude. When you learn to be thankful for your morning, your coffee, even the people who don't treat you right, you find peace." Emma loved his words. She began writing them down in a small notebook, calling it Mr. Harris's Life Lessons. Sometimes, when she had a hard day, she'd reread those pages and instantly feel better. But not everyone admired her kindness. Some customers started making jokes. "Is he your grandpa or your sugar customer?" One man laughed one morning. Everyone chuckled, but Emma's face turned red. Mr. Harris looked at her with concern, but she quickly smiled and shook her head. "Don't worry about it," she whispered. After that day, Mr. Harris began tipping her more, even if it was just a few extra coins. "So they can't say I'm cheap," he said playfully. Emma laughed, touched by his thoughtfulness. Over time, something began to change in the diner. People who once mocked them started seeing the beauty in their friendship. Some regulars even began offering free pastries to Mr. Harris or greeting him warmly when he came in. Emma's kindness had quietly inspired others. There was one morning that stood out the most. The diner was busy, and Emma was rushing between tables. Mr. Harris was sitting quietly in his corner, waiting patiently for his coffee. A new waiter, who didn't know him, served him rudely and even rolled his eyes when the old man took too long to count his change. Emma saw it and immediately stepped in. "Hey," she said gently but firmly. "We don't talk to customers like that here." She smiled at Mr. Harris and placed his usual sandwich on the table. "Here you go, sir. Extra cheese. Just how you like it." Mr. Harris looked at her, his eyes warm with pride. "You've got a good heart, Emma," he said softly. "Don't let this world change that." That night, as Emma closed the diner, she found a small folded note under Mr. Harris's empty cup. It said, "You think you're helping me, but in truth, you're the one keeping me alive." Tears filled her eyes. She didn't know exactly what he meant, but his words felt powerful, almost like a goodbye. The next morning, she came in early, hoping to see him again. As always, she cleaned his table, set out his cup, and poured his coffee before he even arrived. She looked out the window, watching for his familiar slow walk down the street. But that day he didn't come. Nor did he come the next day, or the one after that. Emma started to worry. She asked around, no one had seen him. The diner felt emptier without his presence, without his quiet laughter and thoughtful words. Every morning, she still set out his cup, hoping he would return. Her coworkers noticed but said nothing. They could see the sadness in her eyes. She didn't know it then, but this was the calm before the storm. The silence before a revelation that would turn her world upside down. The whispers, the laughter, the small acts of kindness she had shown. All of it was leading to something far greater, because behind that frail, humble man was a truth no one could have imagined. And soon, that truth would walk into the diner with power, formality, and 4 men in dark suits, changing Emma's life forever. The next morning felt strangely quiet. The sun rose just as it always did, golden light spilling through the diner windows, but something was different. Emma couldn't explain it, yet she felt a heavy feeling in her chest, as if something was missing. She looked toward the corner booth by the window, the one that had become his seat. It was empty. She brushed off the uneasy thought and told herself, maybe he's just running late. Mr. Harris had never missed a morning since the day she met him. Even when it rained, or when the roads were covered with snow, he somehow managed to show up, sometimes soaked, sometimes shivering, but always with that gentle smile. So surely he would come today too. The bell above the diner door rang several times as other customers walked in, but not the one she was waiting for. Every time she heard it, her heart jumped a little, only to sink again when it wasn't him. By 9 a.m., she started to worry. By noon, she felt something close to fear. When her shift ended, she sat at his empty booth for a while, staring at his usual spot. The small plate, the silver spoon, the coffee cup he always used. She sighed softly. Maybe he had caught a cold, she thought. He was old, after all, and the weather had been getting colder. She told herself he would be back tomorrow. But the next day came, and he still didn't show up. Emma's heart grew heavier. Every morning, she still set his cup and saucer on the table out of habit. Felt wrong not to. The other waitresses noticed but didn't say anything. Some even teased her gently. "You're still saving that seat for your old friend?" one asked. Emma smiled faintly. "He'll be back," she said, though her voice trembled a little. Deep down, she wasn't sure anymore. By the end of the week, her worry turned into real fear. She couldn't stand the silence of that empty corner anymore. So, after her shift, she decided to do something she'd never done before. Go looking for him. She remembered once he mentioned that he lived near the park, a small place with a white gate and lots of trees. So she walked there, scanning every bench, every face. The park was almost empty except for a few kids playing and a man feeding pigeons. She asked around, but no one had seen an old man with gray hair and a cane who fit his description. As the sun began to set, she sat on a bench, staring at the fading sky. "Where are you, Mr. Harris?" she whispered softly. Her heart ached in a way she couldn't explain. It was strange. He wasn't family, not even a close friend outside the diner. Yet she missed him terribly. Days turned into a week. The empty booth became a quiet reminder of him. Every time she passed by, she'd imagine him sitting there, smiling, waiting for his coffee. Sometimes, she even caught herself turning her head when the door opened, half expecting him to appear. But he never did. Then one morning, as she was wiping down the counter, the manager walked up to her and said gently, "Emma, maybe it's time to stop saving that seat. He might not be coming back." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to say he would come back, but the words wouldn't leave her mouth. Instead, she just nodded and forced a small smile. Later that day, when she was serving a group of customers, she heard an older couple talking quietly at another table. "Did you hear about that old man who used to walk around the park every morning?" the woman said. "Yeah," the man replied. "I think he passed away last week. Lived alone, I heard. Poor soul." Emma froze. The tray in her hand trembled. Her heart started pounding. No, it can't be him, she thought. Her mind refused to believe it, but her heart knew. A deep sadness washed over her. She went home that evening and cried quietly, hugging her small notebook, the one she had filled with all of Mr. Harris's life lessons. Every word he had said to her felt more precious than ever now. The next few days at the diner felt empty and dull. The laughter, the noise, even the smell of fresh coffee. None of it felt the same. Emma worked silently, keeping to herself. Customers noticed she wasn't as cheerful anymore. Her eyes often drifted to that corner booth. Sometimes she thought about how life could be so unfair. How could someone so gentle and kind just disappear like that? She wished she could have said goodbye, or at least thanked him for the warmth he brought into her mornings. One evening, after closing, Emma sat alone in the diner. The lights were dim, and everything was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She walked over to his booth, ran her fingers across the smooth surface of the table, and whispered, "Thank you for everything." Then she placed a small flower on the table, a white daisy, his favorite, and left it there as a symbol of remembrance. For the next few days, she continued her routine, but her smile never quite reached her eyes. She missed the sound of his voice, his quiet laughter, his kind advice. She often replayed their last conversation in her mind, how he had told her to never let the world change her kindness. At the time, it had felt like just another one of his wise sayings. Now, it felt like a goodbye message. But fate wasn't done with Emma yet. Something was about to happen that would bring all those feelings of sadness, confusion, and love crashing into one single, life-changing moment. It was a cold Monday morning when the bell above the diner door rang, louder than usual. Emma didn't look up right away. She was busy taking an order when she noticed the room had gone completely silent. Every customer had turned their heads toward the entrance. When she finally looked up, her breath caught. Standing there were two men in sharp black suits, holding briefcases, and behind them were four tall bodyguards dressed in dark coats. They looked completely out of place in the small diner. The taller man stepped forward and scanned the room before asking, "Excuse me, is there an Emma Reed here?" Emma froze, the tray in her hand trembling slightly. "Yes, that's me," she said cautiously. The man nodded politely. "We represent Mr. William Harris." At that moment, the world seemed to stop. Mr. William Harris? She blinked, confused. Mr. Harris? She whispered. You mean, the old man who came here every morning? The man's expression softened. Yes, ma'am. He asked us to find you. Everyone in the diner was staring now, murmuring in confusion. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. What could this possibly mean? Why were his lawyers here, and why with bodyguards? She didn't know it yet, but that was the moment her ordinary life began to change forever. Everything she thought she knew about the quiet old man in the corner was about to be rewritten, and nothing would ever be the same again. Emma stood frozen behind the counter, her heart thumping so loudly that she could barely hear anything else. The diner had fallen completely silent. The two men in black suits looked so serious, and the four bodyguards behind them gave off an air of quiet power. No one dared to move. Even the clatter of cups and dishes had stopped. Everyone's eyes were on them, and on her. The taller man stepped forward and spoke calmly. Miss Emma Reed? Emma swallowed hard. Why, yes, she said nervously, wiping her hands on her apron. My name is Mr. Thompson. We represent the estate of Mr. William Harris. Hearing that name made her knees weak. Mr. Harris, the name echoed in her mind. Could he mean her Mr. Harris? The kind, humble old man who sat in that corner booth every morning? But this man said, estate, a word that usually meant someone had passed away and owned something important. She shook her head slightly, confused and frightened. Is he all right? She asked, her voice trembling. The lawyer gave her a gentle look. I'm sorry, Miss Reed. Mr. Harris passed away a few days ago. Emma's breath caught. The words hit her like a wave of ice. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. Around her, the diner stayed quiet. Everyone seemed to sense the weight of the moment. She gripped the edge of the counter to keep herself from falling. The lawyer continued. Before his passing, Mr. Harris left very specific instructions for us to find you. He said that if we came here and asked for Emma Reed, you would know exactly who he meant. Emma wiped her eyes quickly, trying to stay calm. He did, she whispered. Why would he want to see me? I'm just a waitress. Mr. Thompson smiled faintly. According to Mr. Harris, you are much more than that. He pulled an envelope from his briefcase and placed it on the counter. It was cream-colored, sealed with an elegant golden stamp. Her name, Emma Reed, was written in graceful handwriting across the front. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. Mr. Harris asked that you receive this personally, the lawyer said. He also requested that you accompany us to his office if possible. There are matters he wanted us to discuss with you in private. Emma blinked, unsure what to say. Her co-workers were staring at her in shock. Even the manager, who usually had something to say about everything, stood frozen. Finally, Emma nodded slowly. All right, she said quietly. Just give me a minute. She walked to the back room to grab her coat, her mind spinning. Felt unreal, like she was inside a movie. When she came back, the lawyers and bodyguards were waiting near the door. As they stepped outside, curious customers whispered to each other, wondering what kind of secret the old man had left behind. The black car waiting outside looked expensive, the kind of car Emma had only ever seen in magazines. A bodyguard opened the door for her. She hesitated for a moment but then took a deep breath and got in. The lawyers followed. The ride was silent. The city passed by in a blur. Emma held the letter tightly in her lap, afraid to open it just yet. She stared out the window, thinking about all her moments with Mr. Harris. His soft smile, his quiet jokes, his kind advice. Tears rolled down her cheeks again. After about 30 minutes, the car stopped in front of a tall glass building in the city center. The sign at the front read Harris and Company. Properties. Emma froze. Harris, Properties. She turned to the lawyer. Wait, she said slowly. Mr. Harris, he owned this? Mr. Thompson nodded. Yes, Miss Reed. Mr. William Harris was the founder and owner of this company. He was one of the wealthiest men in the state. Emma gasped. Her mind went blank. No, that can't be. He always came to the diner in old clothes. He never even ordered more than coffee and a sandwich. The lawyer smiled gently. Mr. Harris lived a simple life for the last few years. He had more money than he could ever spend, but after his family passed away, he left the business to his trustees and decided to live quietly. He wanted to see the world through ordinary eyes again. Emma sat in silence, stunned. All this time, she had thought he was just a poor, lonely man. She had never imagined that behind his gentle smile was a man with such a powerful name. A billionaire who had chosen to live humbly. Inside the office, everything was elegant. Marble floors, shiny wooden desks, paintings on the walls. They guided her into a private meeting room. On the table sat a few documents and a framed photo of Mr. Harris. Younger, smiling beside a woman Emma assumed was his wife. Mr. Thompson sat across from her. Before he passed, "Mr. Harris recorded a message for you," he said. "Would you like to hear it?" Emma nodded, unable to speak. The lawyer pressed play on a small device, and the old man's gentle voice filled the room. "Hello, Emma," he began. "If you're hearing this, it means I've finally gone to see my Margaret again. Don't be sad, my dear. You gave me more joy in my last days than I had felt in years. You saw me not as a burden or a beggar, but as a person. You reminded me that kindness still exists. Real kindness." Emma covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. The voice continued softly. "I wanted to see if people still cared, even when there was nothing to gain. Most walked past me, but you didn't. You talked to me, smiled at me, fed me when I couldn't pay. For that, I will forever be grateful." There was a pause, and then his voice grew softer. "I have left something for you, Emma. A small gift to thank you for your heart. Use it well and never lose your kindness. The world needs more people like you." When the message ended, Emma sat silently, tears falling freely. She didn't care about the gift. She just missed him. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat gently. "Mr. Harris has left you ownership of one of his properties, a residential building downtown. It's fully paid for and it generates income monthly. He also asked us to provide you with a small trust fund to help you with any future plans." Emma's mouth fell open. "What? No, there must be a mistake. I can't accept that." The lawyer smiled softly. "He was very clear, Miss Reed. He said, and I quote, 'If she tries to refuse, remind her that this isn't payment. It's a thank you for saving an old man's faith in humanity.'" Emma began to cry again, this time harder. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The man everyone thought was poor had turned out to be a billionaire, and he had chosen her, an ordinary waitress, to receive his final act of kindness. As she left the office later, clutching the letter and the papers, she looked up at the sky. "You didn't need to give me anything, Mr. Harris," she whispered softly. "You already gave me more than enough." The wind blew gently, and in that moment, she swore she could almost hear his voice saying, "Kindness never goes unnoticed, Emma. Never." Emma woke up the next morning still feeling as if everything that had happened the day before was just a dream. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the letter and legal documents that now rested on her nightstand. The sunlight coming through her small apartment window made the golden seal on the envelope shine softly, reminding her that it was all real. Mr. Harris, the quiet, kind old man she had served breakfast to for months, was actually a billionaire, and he had left her one of his properties along with a trust fund. Felt unreal, almost too big for her heart to handle. She had never been rich, never even close. Her life had been about long shifts, low pay, and finding joy in little things. Now, her life had suddenly changed overnight. But inside, Emma didn't feel happy in the way she expected. She felt lost. She missed Mr. Harris deeply. His warm smile, the way he always said, "Good morning, Emma. You look brighter than the sun today," and his soft laugh when she rolled her eyes. All those little moments were now gone forever. She made herself a cup of coffee, just the way he liked it, and sat by the window thinking about what to do next. She didn't want to tell anyone yet. She wasn't ready for people to treat her differently. She knew how quickly kindness could change when money was involved. Later that morning, she went to the diner as usual. When she entered, everyone turned to look at her. The news had spread. Her manager, co-workers, and even regular customers were whispering among themselves. Some smiled awkwardly, others looked curious, and a few looked jealous. Her friend Mia, another waitress, rushed over and hugged her. "Emma, I can't believe it. You're on the news, girl. They said a billionaire left you a building." Emma blushed. "Oh no, really?" she groaned, covering her face. "Yes, everyone's talking about you. You're like, famous now." Emma sighed. That was the last thing she wanted. "Mia, please. It's not what it sounds like. He was just a kind man, and I didn't even know who he really was." But the rest of the day, she couldn't escape the attention. Some people congratulated her warmly, but others looked at her differently, their smiles too forced. Her manager, who used to scold her for being late, suddenly treated her with fake politeness. Customers whispered things like, "That's her, the waitress who got lucky." For the first time, Emma felt uncomfortable in the diner she had always loved. The place that once felt like home now felt full of stares and gossip. When her shift ended, she decided to visit the property Mr. Harris had left her. She wanted to see it with her own eyes. Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, had said it was a small apartment building downtown. So after work, she took a bus to the address written on the papers. When she arrived, she was stunned. The building was beautiful, modern, clean, with large glass windows and a small garden out front. There were families playing outside, kids laughing, people watering plants on their balconies. It wasn't just a building, it was a home for many. Emma stood in front of it, her heart swelling with emotion. She couldn't believe Mr. Harris had trusted her with something so precious. She walked around slowly, admiring the flowers near the entrance. One of the tenants, an elderly woman watering her plants, smiled at her. "Are you the new owner?" the woman asked kindly. Emma hesitated. I guess I am," she said softly. The old woman chuckled. "Mr. Harris was a good man. Always visited us during the holidays, made sure everything was in order. You have big shoes to fill, dear." Emma smiled, her eyes a little wet. "I'll do my best." When she entered the lobby, she saw a photo hanging on the wall. A younger Mr. Harris, smiling proudly during the building's opening day. There was a plaque beneath the photo that read, "Built with love, to give people a place they can call home." Emma ran her fingers over the words and whispered, "You really cared about people, didn't you?" That night, she went home and couldn't stop thinking. She realized that Mr. Harris hadn't just given her money. He had given her a chance to continue his kindness, a way to do good in the world just like he had. Over the next few weeks, Emma started learning everything she could about managing property. Mr. Thompson helped her understand the business side, and she met with the tenants to make sure their needs were met. But more than that, she began doing what Mr. Harris would have done, helping quietly. She started small, fixing the broken benches in the garden, repainting the children's play area, planting new flowers. She used her own savings to start a community breakfast program once a week for the residents. The kids began calling her Miss Emma, and the elderly tenants invited her for tea. The building slowly became even more alive, filled with laughter and warmth. Emma could feel Mr. Harris's presence in every corner. But not everyone was happy about her sudden fortune. One day, as she returned from the grocery store, she found a note slipped under her door. It read, "You don't deserve what you got. It should have gone to someone who earned it." Her hands trembled. She didn't know who had written it, but the message stung deeply. For hours, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't deserve it. But then she remembered Mr. Harris's voice in the recording. "You reminded me that kindness still exists." She realized that Mr. Harris hadn't chosen her because she was rich or powerful. He had chosen her because she cared, because she treated him like a human being when no one else did. That night, she stood by her window, looking out at the city lights. "I'll make you proud, Mr. Harris," she whispered. "I promise I'll keep your kindness alive." In the distance, the city hummed with life, and Emma felt a quiet peace settle in her heart. Her life had changed completely, but instead of letting the money change her, she decided to use it for good. And for the first time in her life, Emma felt something she had never truly felt before, a sense of purpose. Not just to live, but to give, to help, to carry on the legacy of a man who had once walked into her diner wearing old clothes and left behind a fortune of kindness. The morning air was cool and soft when Emma stepped out of her apartment, ready to visit the building again. It had been a few weeks since she had taken responsibility for it, and things were finally starting to feel normal. She smiled at how the tenants now waved when they saw her, how the kids shouted her name from across the courtyard, and how even the grumpy old man from apartment 2B had started greeting her with a nod. But deep inside, Emma still felt a quiet emptiness. She missed Mr. Harris every day. Even though she had never known his true identity until after his death, she often wished he could see what she was doing now. She wanted to show him that his trust in her hadn't been misplaced. That morning, as she entered the building, she noticed a few tenants gathered near the lobby notice board. They looked worried. When she approached, one of them, a young mother named Clara, turned to her and said, "Miss Emma, we just got this notice." Emma frowned and took the paper from Clara's hand. It was a letter from a big real estate company, Morgan Holdings. The letter said they were planning to buy the land on which the building stood and redevelop it into luxury apartments. They offered large sums of money to the tenants if they agreed to move out. Emma felt her stomach twist. She knew what redevelop really meant. Tearing down the homes of ordinary people to make something shiny and expensive that only the rich could afford. "This can't be real," she said, scanning the paper again. But at the bottom was a legal signature, stamped and official. "Is there something you can do?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "We don't want to leave. This is our home." Emma looked around at their worried faces. Families, elderly couples, young people just starting out. She thought of Mr. Harris's words, "Built with love, to give people a place they can call home." There was no way she would let this happen. She went straight to Mr. Thompson, the lawyer who had helped her before. When she showed him the letter, he adjusted his glasses and read it carefully. He murmured. "Morgan Holdings has been trying to buy several of Mr. Harris's properties for years. He refused them every time. Looks like they're trying again now that he's gone." Emma leaned forward anxiously. "But they can't just take it, right? It belongs to me now." Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. "Yes, that's true. But they might try to pressure you, offer a huge deal or use legal tricks to make you agree. You'll have to be very careful, Emma." She frowned. "I don't want their money. I want to keep the building safe. This place means something to me and to all the people living there." The lawyer smiled softly. "Then you'll have to fight for it. And I'll help you." Over the next few days, Emma met with lawyers, read through piles of documents, and learned everything she could about property rights. It was exhausting, but she refused to give up. Every time she thought about quitting, she remembered Mr. Harris's gentle voice and his belief in kindness and fairness. But the fight wasn't easy. Morgan Holdings sent representatives to meet her, men in expensive suits with practiced smiles. One of them, a tall man named Mr. Gray, leaned back in his chair during their meeting and said in a smooth voice, "Miss Reed, you're a young woman with a bright future. Selling this property could make you a millionaire overnight. Why waste time managing a bunch of tenants?" Emma looked him straight in the eyes. "Because they're not just tenants. They're people. Families. This building is their home, not a business deal." Mr. Gray chuckled. "You're too sentimental. That's not how the world works." She replied firmly, "Then maybe the world needs to change." Her boldness surprised even herself. She had never spoken with such confidence before. Mr. Gray left the meeting looking frustrated. A week later, Emma received another letter, this time offering her triple the amount. It was enough money to buy a mansion, travel the world, and never work again. But she didn't even hesitate. She tore the letter in half and threw it away. That evening, she called a meeting with the tenants. Everyone gathered in the small community hall downstairs. They were nervous, whispering among themselves, wondering what would happen. Emma stood in front of them and said, "I want to be honest with all of you. The company that tried to buy this building before is back again. But I want you to know something. I'm not selling. This place was built for people like us, and I'll do everything I can to protect it." The room fell silent for a moment. Then a soft clap started from the back, and soon everyone was cheering. Some people even cried. They trusted her, and she wasn't going to let them down. The next few weeks were hard. The company tried everything. Threats, false rumors, and even fake documents claiming they had ownership rights. But with Mr. Thompson's help, Emma gathered proof, fought back in court, and finally, after a long battle, won the case. When the verdict was announced, she sat in the courtroom with tears in her eyes. The judge's words echoed in her mind. Ownership remains with Miss Emma Reed. The property is protected under her care. Outside the courthouse, the tenants waited anxiously. When she stepped out and gave them a thumbs up, the crowd erupted in joy. People hugged her, thanked her, and some even called her a hero. That night, there was a small celebration in the building courtyard. There were fairy lights strung across the trees, music playing softly, and everyone brought food to share. The children danced, the old folks laughed, and Emma felt a happiness she hadn't felt in a long time. As she sat quietly on a bench, looking at all the smiling faces, she whispered, "You'd be proud of me, Mr. Harris. I kept your promise." At that moment, a cool breeze blew through the courtyard, brushing her hair gently. For a second, she could almost imagine Mr. Harris standing there in his usual corner, smiling at her with that kind, knowing look. She closed her eyes and smiled back. Emma had learned something powerful through it all. Kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength. The same kindness that made her serve a poor old man years ago had now given her the courage to stand up for what was right. And as the lights twinkled above her and laughter filled the air, Emma finally felt at peace. She had honored the man who had changed her life, and she had become, in her own way, a reflection of his heart. Someone who believed that no act of kindness ever goes unnoticed. The days after the court victory felt like a dream for Emma. The building was safe, the tenants were happy, and her heart finally felt light after weeks of stress and fear. For the first time since she met Mr. Harris, she felt like she was truly living the lesson he had tried to teach her, that kindness could build something stronger than money ever could. Each morning, she woke up early, made a cup of coffee, and stood by the window of her small apartment watching the sunrise. It reminded her of the mornings at the diner. The same quiet stillness, the same soft light touching the world. Sometimes she could almost hear Mr. Harris's voice saying, "Good morning, Emma." It always made her smile through the tears that followed. One morning, she decided to visit his grave. It had been months since she last went. She bought a bouquet of white lilies, his favorite flower, and took a long walk to the cemetery. The sun was shining, and the air carried the gentle scent of blooming flowers. When she reached his grave, she knelt down and placed the lilies carefully beside the headstone. The stone was simple, elegant, just like him. It read, "William Harris, a kind soul who believed in goodness." Emma sat quietly for a long time, her fingers tracing his name. "You know," she whispered, "I finally did it. I kept your promise. I protected the building, and everyone's happy. They even call it Harris Haven now." She smiled through her tears. "You gave me a life I never dreamed of, but the best thing you gave me wasn't money. It was purpose." The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, she felt something warm in her heart, like he was listening. As she sat there, she thought back to that first morning when she had met him. Tired, quiet, and a little lost. He had been sitting in that diner corner, wearing the same old sweater and smiling like he didn't have a care in the world. And she, without realizing it, had changed both of their lives with a cup of coffee and a kind word. When she left the cemetery, she felt a strange peace. It was as if a chapter of her life had come full circle. Back at the building, the tenants were planning something special. A small celebration in honor of Mr. Harris. They called it the Day of Kindness. Emma had no idea what they were planning until she walked into the courtyard that evening and saw everything decorated with fairy lights, flowers, and photos of Mr. Harris. Children were holding handmade cards, and the residents had set up tables full of food. Clara, the young mother, walked up to Emma and smiled. "We wanted to thank you," she said softly, "for fighting for us, for never giving up, and for reminding us that kindness still matters." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to thank me," she said, shaking her head. "I just did what anyone should do." But Clara smiled knowingly. "No, Emma. Not everyone would do what you did." They all gathered around a small stage where a photo of Mr. Harris was placed with candles around it. One of the children, a little boy who lived on the second floor, stepped up and said, "This is for Mr. Harris and Miss Emma, because they both showed us that being kind is the best thing you can be." Everyone clapped, and Emma couldn't stop crying. She covered her face, overwhelmed by love and gratitude. Later that night, as the party went on, Emma sat quietly under the fairy lights watching everyone laugh and talk. Music played softly in the background, and children ran around with balloons. She thought about how far she had come, from a struggling waitress to the caretaker of an entire community. She hadn't just inherited a building, she had inherited a family. When the music slowed, Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, approached her with a small envelope in his hand. "I found something while sorting through Mr. Harris's old files," he said with a gentle smile. "It's addressed to you." Emma's heart skipped. She opened the envelope carefully and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was familiar, neat, and thoughtful. It read, "Dear Emma, if you're reading this, it means my time on this earth has ended. But I want you to know that meeting you was one of the greatest blessings of my life. You reminded me that even in a world full of greed, there are still people who care for no reason other than love. You saw me when no one else did. Asterisk. This property I've given you isn't a reward. It's a responsibility. I built it to give people a home, and I know you'll continue that dream. Don't let the world change your kindness, Emma. Use it to change the world instead. With gratitude and faith, William Harris." Emma pressed the letter to her heart, tears falling freely. She looked up at the stars, whispering, "I'll keep your promise, Mr. Harris. I always will." In the months that followed, Harris Haven became more than just a building. It became a symbol of kindness. People from other parts of the city came to volunteer, planting trees, painting walls, organizing charity events. Emma started a small foundation in Mr. Harris's name to help low-income families find homes and education. She never used the trust fund for luxury or personal gain. Every dollar went into helping others, just like Mr. Harris had done in his quiet, humble way. The local news even featured her story, calling her the waitress who changed lives. But Emma never cared for fame. What mattered to her were the smiles, the laughter, and the feeling of doing something good. One evening, as she stood on the rooftop of the building, watching the city lights shimmer below, she thought about how strange life was. A simple act of kindness, one breakfast shared, one conversation offered, had turned into something so big, something that changed countless lives. She realized that kindness truly was a circle. What she had given to Mr. Harris had come back to her 100 times over. Not in money, but in love, gratitude, and peace. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden below. Emma smiled and whispered to the night sky, "You were right, Mr. Harris. Kindness never goes unnoticed." And as the stars sparkled above her, she knew he was watching, proud, smiling, and at peace. Knowing his legacy lived on not through wealth or buildings, but through the heart of a waitress who had once believed that a small act of kindness could change everything. Because in the end, it had.